Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams-Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams-Birch, and I am joined by my favorite co-host. What's up, Alex?
Thank you for having me, Emmy. Hey, everyone. It's Alex Gartner. We are excited to be here for this series of the ACDA National Standing Committee for Advocacy and Collaboration to talk with Dr. Peter Steenblik. Dr. Peter Steenblik. Wow, I know him. I can say his name.
You got it.
To talk about burnout, something that, you know, we all have experienced at some degree in our careers. Maybe we're experiencing it right now. Maybe you're experiencing it in this moment. And if that is true, then this episode is for you.
Even if you're not experiencing burnout, I'm in that point of our quarter where I'm like, oh my gosh, there are so many cool things left to do. I don't feel burned out, but I know that there is a point that it will come towards the end of the quarter. And this episode with Dr. Steenblik is so chocked full of ideas. So save this one, share this one, rate and review this one. It's how more people will get to hear it. But most importantly, listen for yourself, because as Dr. Steenblik says, there is no shame in burnout. It is most often those people who are the most productive, most dedicated, and most committed. It's those podcast listeners just like yourself. So we are stoked to bring you this episode. Of course, all the episodes on the Music Ed Matters podcast are sponsored by our friends over at Perform International. Hey, that's a great way to avoid burnout. Travel.
Yes.
Oh, what a great idea. I can't wait to travel this summer. Yay. Okay, back to topic. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Perform International, and it is curated by the awesome committee, ACDA Standing Committee for Advocacy and Collaboration. That's enough for me. Let's get to the show. Dr. Peter Steenblik. Oh, you should probably watch it on YouTube at some point too, because there's some great slides, but we transfer them for you. So here's Dr. Steenblik and how to avoid burnout.
Hello and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I am not your host, Alex Gartner, but I'm grateful for Emmy for having me back to interview my very dear friend and colleague, Dr. Peter Steenblik, who is the Director of Choral Activities at the University of West Florida here in Pensacola. It's sad that we have to take so long to see each other, and we do it on Zoom more frequently than we do in person, but you know, that's how life goes sometimes. This is brought to you by the ACDA National Advocacy and Collaboration Standing Committee. We are very excited to bring Dr. Steenblik here to talk about managing burnout. This is a topic that our committee members have weighed in on for several months now. And it is that time of year when things are about to get very crazy with the holiday performance schedule coming up and with all the stress of the world going on that weighs on us day in and day out. Burnout is a very real thing, and Dr. Steenblik has presented many sessions and done some incredible research of his own around this burnout strategies, and we're excited to have him here today to talk about it. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, to both of you. I hope that the listeners are not experiencing signs of burnout, but it does happen to even the best teachers. In fact, generally it happens to the most enthusiastic, most hardworking, most podcast listening to teachers, and there is no shame around burnout. So let's talk about it. Many of my resources will be listed in the comment section of this podcast. The research that is here represents a broad knowledge base. Anyway, but I'm adding my own experiences to these wonderful researchers who have done a lot of work. Okay, so what is burnout exactly? We're going to define and discuss for just a moment. There's no shame around burnout. It happens to the best. Burnout versus rust out. When we talk about burnout, we're not talking about rust out. Rust out is maybe the teachers that never should have begun teaching in the first place. Burnout is a process to individuals, not an event. I like to think of it as a sliding spectrum, a sliding scale. And burnout is not periodic episodes of discouragement. We will all have those every day, every week, every month. We will all experience those. My own experience and my own journey of burnout, however, I graduated with my bachelor's degree, taught for 3 years in the public schools, then started working on my master's while teaching in the public schools. And I was operating, I feel at the best I could. At year 7, so now this is 1 year after the master's degree, and I'm still teaching, I started to get discouraged for reasons that we'll talk about in a moment. I had finished the master's, but no promotion, because that doesn't generally happen in our field. Then in year 8, I had a big change in administration. And then in year 9, significant personal problems of students were affecting the choir. And so by year 10 in the public schools, I just needed out, and I was completely burnt out. But reminder, it is not an event, it's a process, and it shouldn't be confused with these occasional feelings one has. It's the stacking of them. Burnout is a symptom of extrinsic and intrinsic issues, not a character flaw. The people that are most at risk, and this has been researched by many of the people that are documented in this podcast, music educators who are often the most productive, dedicated, and committed to their fields are frequently most affected by burnout. It happens to the most enthusiastic and passionate, ages 30 to 45. Compare, and why those ages, compare the choral profession or teaching profession to the traditional business model. At the age of 30 to 45 is when those big promotions start coming, or you move across the country for a bigger leadership position. Then years, when we've been teaching years 7 to 15, that's when the most burnout happens for that same reason. Your marital status, single or divorced teachers are more at risk. And then edited evidences of burnout. If you're looking in your own self or around your colleagues, physical evidences, think of weight gain, migraines, backache, tense muscles. There are intellectual evidences, overall problems making decisions or feelings of being overwhelmed. Social evidences, withdrawn from families and friends, hermetic a bit at work, or hobbies sit dormant. Emotional evidences, we're talking about anxiety or depression, emotionally, or being hermetic at home. And then about our workplace. And then the last evidence areas is spiritual. Maybe our personal values are affected. We have 4 main contributors, however, and this session is not designed to necessarily solve all the problems, but learn how to identify and how to address some of these issues. 4 main contributors. The first is administrative. Just looking down this list, and I'll read for those that are just listening. Poor salary, perceived lack of support, heavy teaching schedule, insufficient prep time, travel between buildings and jobs in an itinerant situation, excessive or additional duties, insufficient budget, ongoing need to justify your department, confusing expectations, or concerned about job security. Those are all considered an administrative contributor to the bigger problem of the burnout. And there are student-related issues, whether it's poor discipline, lack of enthusiasm, or the poor public perception of teachers. Then there's the music-related, performance expectations, or the inability to dig deep, or loss of personal skills. And then finally, personal circumstance. And this does happen. Maybe your life goals have shifted. Maybe family dynamics have changed. You've had a relocation, or a spouse or parent or child has needs at home, personal family illness, or one that we all experienced together, this COVID-19 pandemic. All of these are the 4 main factors. So when I go back to my stages of burnout in year 9 and 10 of my own teaching, I was considering going for a doctorate degree at that time. And I talked to one of my recommenders, one of my letters of reference writers. And I said, I just need to talk to you about my burnout. And she says, okay. And I said, you're writing a letter for me to go get a doctorate, and you're in support of that? She says, yes. And I said, why would that be the right thing? And she said to me, now, she helped me categorize these contributors. Is it that you can't handle rehearsing Brahms one more moment? Or is it that you're having administrative problems? Or is it that you don't want to be around the students anymore? And I said, well, it's administrative. She says, okay, but that's not the career. I still love my students. I love being with them. I still love the music. I loved rehearsing it. And so we learned to compartmentalize where the contributors were. And then if we all reflect back on our shared situation over these last few years, here's some slides of my groups rehearsing outside. You can see the sweat coming down our faces and our masks. And it felt a little bit more like this sometimes, this Jurassic World photo. So now we're going to talk about how to manage these. Once you've identified where the main contributor is, we'll talk about management. We're going to discuss practicing self-care, maintaining and adjusting your perspective, and then minimizing sources of frustration. Today, for the listeners, I'd like you to identify one thing in each area that you can address this week. That's 3 things: 1 item of self-care, 1 item of perspective adjustment, and 1 item of sources of frustration that can be minimized. So we're going to go down a list of possible self-care ideas. Sleep is non-negotiable. I know Dr. Birch will back me up on these. Meals are non-negotiable. Think of a time when you've stopped to eat with somebody during the middle of the day. I keep meals in my fridge, and my students even know this now. I have yogurts and string cheese and granola bars at the ready for me anytime. Exercise is a non-negotiable, right? All right.
I mean, you're speaking my language now. Like you are
Yes.
100%. I mean, the whole thing, I've been like scribbling notes this whole time. And now you're like, yes, these are the things I know.
And these are non-negotiables. I mean, for me, it says I will get my 7 hours of sleep or 8 hours of sleep, and I'll set that clock. Midday walks. Judy Evans was a presenter at our Florida Music Educators Association conference a couple years ago, and she suggested taking a walk around the outside of the building once a day. And I've started doing that, just leaving during a class change, walking around the external walking path around the building. Vocal health is a huge part of self-care. When I was a teacher in the public schools, I often would, and I was singing as well and taking care of my vocal health. And so many public teachers said to me, "Oh, I wish I could still sing." And we're not taking care of our voices often, the things that we went into the profession in the first place. Write a lot of thank you notes. Board meetings, Alex, board meetings. We sit on a lot of board meetings together. And one of the ways that I get through my board meetings, because they are so frustrating, I take a stack of thank you notes with me. And I may be writing those to people way outside of the room, but it keeps me in a place where I'm just sitting there writing a thank you note to a friend. Maybe Jimmy Fallon ideas for that as well. And then also you'll start to be lifted when people receive those, and then you get a nice email back or things like that. Back to the vocal health part, be a participant, be inspired, join an opera chorus, a community choir. This may mean that you have a chance to sing with a group, or maybe if you're the only one that's cooking in your area, or you're the only one that's directing, maybe plan a piece or two where you can sing with them. Sacred spaces. I try to remind my students and my colleagues to have sacred spaces. What do I mean by that? For me, there's no work in the bedroom. I don't take my computer in there. I don't take any work in. There are places in my home where work is not allowed. I take that one step further though, and my car, choral music is not allowed in my car. Not allowed. I'll listen to cheesy British pop or anything just totally predictable, the summer hits, but I don't listen to the 4i Requiem in my car. Stick to the work day. Our contract hours are a thing, and it's okay to stick to the work day. One of my students was trying to set up an observation with a middle school teacher the other day, and she said to me, "I got his request, but it came in at 9 o'clock at night, and I don't answer emails after 8 p.m. And I said, "That is so healthy. Way to go." Go home for dinner whenever possible. In our profession, teaching all day, and then we have a concert at night, it's easy to get stuck at the school. On concert days, I intentionally wear clothes that I cannot perform in. I'll show up in exercise attire or jeans, And so I have to go home for dinner. If that one student says, but I need to run the solo again, I'll say, no, I must go home because I cannot perform in this. If you can't go home for dinner, and there are those times, take a book with you out to a restaurant. And you can sit at lunch with, I don't know, you take the Michelle Obama book and it feels like you're sitting at dinner with Michelle. Ditch the phone in those times. Casual dress is not just for Friday. Casual dress is for, well, Fridays or any day that you feel you need a Friday, or maybe a Monday that you still want to carry through that feeling of the weekend. That's really okay as far as your self-care. Send students to performances without you. It's gonna be okay. They do fine. And then programming choices. I learned early, my second year teaching, was given this advice: never program something you don't like. Why? It's the last thing you're gonna rehearse during the day. It's gonna receive the least amount of time, and it will already be the least prepared. So just don't program things you don't like when possible. And then the last idea is the course load. I have choose something different, or maybe move to a different level. One of my colleagues here in Florida, Alex and I both know, she was feeling burnt out. And so she added a special needs group in the middle of her day that comes in and they make music together and they teach simple songs. And that is the class that has now been giving her life, to the point where she now has 2 sections and is considering even going into that field of study later in career. So that's my list of self-care. Dr. Birch, anything to add?
I love how you have brought in not just things we can do, like the first ones you gave, I'm like, yes, I'm totally already thinking of those, but I had never thought of any of the others. And I have an excessively long work day on 2 days a week, just the way my class schedule fell this quarter. And I think if I would go home for dinner instead of eating in my office, that might be a game changer. I also love this whole walk around the building point. That just seems so doable between classes. And what a great example that you're then being for your students. I love how these examples are not just like your go-to. The only one that I have on here that's super important to me is meditation. I am a huge fan of some type of morning calm and evening calm. That's actually part of our perks at my institution. Part of our benefits package is a subscription to one of those type of apps that offers different types of mindfulness and meditation practices. And that has been a game changer in the mornings, especially just taking that moment of calm before going off into the day and kind of setting that intention. It's fun.
Great.
Yeah, I want to echo the going home for dinner. I think that's really important as community folks. And Peter directs a community choir too. The evenings can be long. So I don't really get to eat dinner with my family a whole lot, but we do find intentional time during the day to be together, whether it's like at daycare drop off or at, just in like the hour that I have between 5 p.m. and my 6 p.m. rehearsal. So it's not always a meal, but finding some time to be not working during these 12-hour days, super important.
I appreciate that you recognize that. Sometimes it takes creativity. My Mondays are really wonky. So I have dinner at 4:00 in the afternoon and I have just a really light one, and then I go on with the rest of my day. So to the listeners, not all of this is possible. This is maybe a lot of suggestions or a lot of change. Pick one of these things to implement this week. Now we move into the perspective side, shifting into a healthy perspective. This is another way to minimize our burnout symptoms. The first one I like to suggest is having a bad day barometer. I was out getting my hair done. There's another self-care. I was out getting my hair done, and a woman was talking to me in the next chair over, and she paints Christmas ornaments for a living, and paints them just very detailed. A lot of detail on these Christmas ornaments, and she works all year. Starts painting them in January, and she said by December they're on every surface, every floor, every chair in her home, and then she's selling them through December. And she said to me, a bad day is when a Christmas ornament that I have painted carefully falls off the counter and breaks. And then she smiled and she said, I love that is a bad day for me. And I started thinking, in our profession, sometimes a bad day may be when Alex takes a breath in the wrong place and it just ruins the thing.
I ruined everything.
And hold it, let's take a step back. That's a bad day. Man, I love that I'm in a profession where that's a bad day.
Amen. We just talked about this yesterday in one of the classes. They were doing a little sight singing quiz, and they were nervous because they were being quizzed on something big we've been working on the whole quarter so far, but they all could do it. And no one got a B. No one.
Right,
they all
right.
got A's. And they were like, but it's not 100. And I'm like, oh, y'all, how cool is it that like A, our test is a singing test. B, we're cheering for each other after everyone sings their singing test. And C, the worst grade in the class was like still an A.
Right, right. We have a saying in my office that is, there are no musical emergencies. And that's just been such a healthy perspective. One of our new colleagues brought that into the office. Keep humor in the day. This is another point. I have if the language is unacceptable, I hope your bleep button is ready, but I have a why the hell am I here drawer. And that is the drawer that is the closest to my chair in my desk. And it is filled with the thank you notes, with the little invitations from students, emails. If I get a positive email, I'll print it out and put it in my why the hell am I here drawer. And about once a week, I flip through it. Alex is showing us his.
I'm holding my why the hell am I here box.
I love it.
I have a box that I keep
I
in
have
my
a
cabinet.
I have a bucket. It's right behind my head.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So we all learned this from somewhere. So if our listeners I picked it up in my student teaching. My wonderful supervisor at Taylorsville High School in Salt Lake City, Utah, gave me that idea. And it's just meaningful pictures, wedding invitations, all of the things. This next bullet point, stop the screaming. I'll have to narrate for the people that are just listening, but you'll probably recognize the audio on this clip. Some days are like this.
We'll see the first three go before her. And her mangy little dog, too. How about a little fire, Scarecrow? You cursed brat! Look what you've done! I'm melting! Melting! Oh, what a world! What a world! Who would have thought a good little girl like you could destroy my beautiful wickedness? Ah, look out! Look out! I'm going!
Now wait for it. Wait for it. Wait for it. Now, look at the faces here. We have the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion and Dorothy all looking at the witch after had this massive meltdown, which happens sometimes in our rehearsals, but it doesn't have the same effect you think it might have. Look at their faces. This is the faces of your students after you've had one of these moments. Are they ready to obey her every command? I don't think so. You've got Scarecrow looking over and going, what just happened? So stop the screaming when it, especially when, minimize that. It's not effective. Alex?
Yeah, I've seen this presentation live and in person, and the room just erupts with laughter at this slide, where it's all the Wizard of Oz characters just staring at the Wicked Witch pile with just astonishment on their face. And we've all had that moment where our singers have looked back at us with that same level of astonishment. And then I immediately just like, why on earth did I just do that? I don't do it a whole lot anymore. Actually, I don't think I do it anymore. But I definitely earlier in my career, I definitely feigned the meltdown to try and be effective. And it definitely did not work.
Right. I too saw Lynn Cooper of Asbury College presenting this session. And I had a day like that morning when he presented this, and I went, oh, thank you. So we're just evaluating Lynn's work, and just this is a valuable clip to keep in mind.
Also, it's no shame to those who do have meltdowns. Like it happens.
Yeah, I had one yesterday.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I work with kids, and I realize that sometimes you just need like this title is, perspective. You need a little
Mm-hmm.
perspective.
I think too, one of the reasons, so we call the early in my career, we were doing school visits as part of an outreach program for a community ensemble I worked with. And we were in a school, and going back to what we had talked about before, some of the things that can cause the burnout, sometimes it's the behavior or the behavior that is not reinforced by your administration when you are kind of feeling alone in that whole behavior management sequence. And so we had walked into a classroom, we'd had a great conversation with the teacher, we knew what we were going to do. In come the kids, and it is just a cacophony of sound. And this teacher is just up there going, hey, hey, and just like, hey. So we call it the hey teacher. Don't be a hey teacher. That does nothing. And I just went up there and did like a little rhythm activity, and the kids were like, whoop. And they all got really quiet. But that moment has stuck with me. The times that I have wanted to be like, hey, I'm like, don't be a hey teacher, find a different way. But it doesn't change too how easy it is to have those meltdowns when you're tired or when you're hungry or when there's other things going on outside of your control that have absolutely nothing to do with what the students are doing.
And when that happens, I don't know how you two were coached. When I started teaching, I hope it wasn't this way. When I started teaching, I had one of those days, and I said to a mentor of mine, what do I do now? I had this meltdown. It was inappropriate. And she said to me, never apologize. You just keep going. And I don't agree with that anymore. An apology goes a long way to say, hey, students, I had plumbing issues at home, and I brought that into rehearsal, and I was coming in with a negative attitude, and I'm sorry that I brought it into the room.
And I think that's
apology
important.
Is really healthy.
Yeah, because there are not a lot of adults especially for kids, in a lot of kids' lives that model that behavior, and it's a generational cycle. I mean,
right.
If we as adults can't model true humility, how are we expecting kids to do the same thing? We have to model the behaviors that we want our students to emulate as well.
It's just like the taking a walk around the block, taking a moment, showing them that you have the food in the refrigerator. All of those pieces are modeling that. But also, speaking of those generational things, burnout was a claim to fame. It was something we strived for not too long ago. And so this perspective, I remember we were having a picnic with one of my ensembles, and we had read a book together, and we were talking about what we learned while reading the book together. And they said something so profound. I was like, this chapter really hit me because I had never thought of taking care of myself in that way. And one girl was like, well, you better learn. Like, oh. Yeah. The fact that they were even aware that that should be a priority tells us so many great things happening for this next generation. They are aware of this not burnout moment. Yes, I don't know if you guys, this is the last thing. Have you guys seen the reel? This might have been like a month or so ago, where it's showing like elder millennials versus Gen X versus Gen Z, and it's on your birthday, and like, you know, the Gen Xers never miss for their birthday. The millennials are like, oh, I guess I'm working on my birthday. No one wished me happy birthday. I'll leave 30 minutes early. And then the Gen Zers are like, took off for my birthday.
Yeah.
It's just so cool to see those boundaries being set.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So stop the screaming and adjust that perspective to apologize. Take a minute to observe your peers. Can you get out there and attend a festival where you're not conducting? Can you go to a nearby school on your prep hour? Can you think of a time where you were able to see someone? I want to share a Malcolm Gladwell quote. He was asked once, what's the most interesting story you've ever worked on? And he responded with, in order to be a good journalist, the most interesting story I've ever worked on is the one I'm doing right now. And that's we get the question a lot in our profession, what's your favorite piece of choral music? Right now, my favorite piece of choral music is, boom, what I'm working on right now. Their school day. One of the most powerful things that I've done is I was a student for a day. I had a program in my school district that hired a substitute to come in and do my classes while I attended the classes that my students attended. And it allowed me to see the students before and after. When I went to a physics class for 90 minutes and then walked into choir and left to an English class, I realized, oh, this is why it takes them a minute to catch up and maybe they're not focused right away. Give students a chance to lead and watch them succeed. expectation and permission. We have the ability to set high expectations, but we also must balance that with the permission to fail. Attainable to-do lists. Many of us in the practice of creating daily to-do lists. I would suggest weekly, not daily. And the first item on my to-do list is always create a to-do list. So then I've listed the things, and the first thing to cross off is that. Remember that administration is temporary. Exodus 1:8 says, "Now there arose up a king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph." Your admin will change, and just keep that in perspective, for good or for bad. If you're with a great administration, it's going to change someday. And if you're with an unsupportive administration, it's going to change someday. Learn to adapt with integrity. I have learned to say to various superintendents or principals that come down with the latest fad for the year. Oh, this year we're working on, I don't know, insert smaller learning communities or et cetera. I have learned to just say, I will call good teaching whatever you want me to call it, but I'm going to do what I do. Sorry for any principals listening, but that's how I get through it. Identify your triggers, the things that are triggering to you. Write a mission statement. And we're not going to take time to do that here, but there are a lot of resources to writing a mission statement, and that helps guide most of your decisions. Invest in other programs. This may seem counterintuitive for those of us that are wholly invested in the choral art, but go to a swim meet. Take some time to go and watch your students succeed in that arena. Or last week, I went to a dog costume contest that my students were putting on, and it was the best thing in the world for me to watch them in another place. And then finally, extracurricular obligations. We all have to go back to the school sometimes, or back to the choir room for a recital or a concert of some sort. Just adjust it. My extracurricular obligation today is I get to support Isabel in her recital, not, oh, I have to be there to listen to this kid sing. So that's my list of adjusting your perspective. Anything to add?
Yeah, I love your adapt with integrity. I had a board member the other day kind of lose their cool on me because I had to decline a performance opportunity that didn't work with our schedule, and didn't really align with our missional priorities at the time. And I would offer, we just went through the Pensacola Children's Course went through a big strategic plan update, and our facilitator introduced what she called a strategic bullseye. And I wish I could pull it up, but I don't have it. It's a bullseye, and there are 4 rings. And the middle of that ring is that mission statement that we have, that we all somewhere deep inside have, whether it's written or not. And then as those rings get further out, they get a little bit more broad. Mm-hmm. And the further away you move from the center, it's not that it's not your priority. It's just, it's not the center. It's not the core of what you do. And so when the opportunities come up, I love this. I have it printed out and it's posted right here behind me. When these opportunities come up, these shiny new quick things that seem like they're a really good idea, I can look at that and be like, is that really in line with what we need to be focusing on right now? The answer is yes. The answer is no, but it's a nice visual cue to help us make decisions. And so I love it.
Thank you. That puts that you've described what I try to practice. My university singers, our main objective is to provide academic learning of choral music for the students. When administrative requests come, say the university president wants us to do X fundraiser or sing the national anthem at this thing, what you're saying, are there a way it gets from that? Sometimes we say yes to those, sometimes we say no. And I have it in the mission statement that while it's beneficial that the university singers provide entertainment or national anthems for certain events, that is not our primary goal. And we will try to accommodate as many of those as possible, but we cannot always say yes to those. And it's in the mission statement. So that's always helped. So to the listeners at home, try to implement one change in perspective from this list. So now we've got 2 things. We've got one self-care that we're going to try to implement and one perspective shift. Now, the last area is minimizing frustrations. And this one is one that I have to remind myself a lot. The other two come easier to me. This is where I need to focus a lot. Take care of your secretaries, custodians, copy center personnel, all those wonderful people that are helping you. They run your program.
Snaps.
Take care of them.
The
Take
same
them
thing.
cookies or there we go. Just maybe once a week or once a month, drop off a little thank you note or something for them. Keep a clean desk. Isn't it true that often the biggest source of frustration is you're looking for that single piece of paper that you've got on your desk and it's buried somewhere on there, and you spend 20 minutes looking for a stapler or something like that? It's like, just keeping a clean desk is really helpful.
Peter, Einstein's desk was an absolute atrocity when he died.
Yes, but he didn't need a stapler.
I feel that
that's
so
my
much
slippery
so.
behavior. When I enter my office and my desk is just an absolute nightmare, I'm like, okay, I need to
I can't
right
do
now.
it every day. I can't keep it clean every day, but I try to clean it every Friday, and I don't go home on Fridays until the desk is clean.
That's a good point. I just have different workstations. I have my desk at school just has the laptop on it and everything else is in drawers.
Okay.
I have nothing. And then my desk at home, I have two different workstations. One's my desk where there's nothing here, but I have a cabinet that has doors that has baskets. So I have needs to be taken care of this week. Just don't need to lose it this quarter. Look at this when you get time later. So I have these baskets so that it stays off, because as a person with attention order issues, I cannot function if there's stuff on my desk.
Right.
It has to be empty.
Right. I can't be creative. I can function, but if I have to do anything that requires creativity, I need this clean space. Email inbox is a desk now.
Amen.
Keep a clean email inbox. Okay. Voice preservation. This goes back to the first thing of the self-care. Make sure you're taking care of your voice. It can be also a source of frustration if you're not able to model appropriately, or if you're not singing your best, and that's a really hard thing. My very first principal gave me some advice that, again, here we're going to anger some of our superintendents that might be listening. She came over to me, and this was my first week on the job, and I had all these things to fill out, and she sat on my desk like a good principal will. And she just says, "Hey, that's a lot of paperwork to do, isn't it?" And I said, "Yes, it is." And she says, "I'm going to give you a tip that will save your whole career." I said, "What is that?" She says, "Never fill anything out until it's asked for a second time by whoever needs it." She says, "Everything important will have a built-in false deadline. Wait for that and then fill it out." And I'll tell you, that has helped me so much in setting some boundaries of what I'm going to address. Now, over time, you start to learn what are the important things and what are not. But we don't fill out everything, and then they'll come ask for it. Delegation. This is a huge one. Just find your ways to do that. The big five. My students know that on a performance day, if they have a question, if someone goes up and they have a question, I will hold this in front of them. I've got my 5 fingers, and they know what that means. They have this checklist. 1, is it important? 2, is it important right now? 3, can I solve it myself? 4, is anyone else in the whole entire world able to solve this for me instead of Dr. Steenblik? Or 5, even if I did bring this to his attention, is there anything he could do about it? The example that I want to use for this one is when we were performing at a Utah MEA, and one of my students was 5 hours away from our school, so we'd been on a bus half the day, and he shows up to the performance call time in the smallest tux I have ever seen on a human in my life. And I said, "Jake, what on earth are you wearing?" He says, "I did the 5. I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I left my tux at home, and I said to myself, is it important? Yes. Is it important right now? Can I solve it myself? No. 4, can anyone else in the whole entire world solve it for me?" And then he remembered he'd seen a mannequin in the exhibit hall with a tux on it. And he went to that exhibitor and he says, can I please have that tux for 30 minutes? I've never been prouder of a student in my life. And what I did not tell him is that I had an extra tux in my car because I assumed that somebody might forget one, but I didn't want to he went in and he performed in the smallest tux ever. And it brought me so much joy.
I will add that we have a policy at the Children's Chorus that parents are not allowed to corner us before rehearsals in the 10-minute transition or setup time. Like, we have it written out. Like, if you have something that you need, do not ask an instructor because we will not be able to help you. And it's not, and we explain it year after year. It's not that we are like off-putting and we don't want to help you. It's that our brain is not focused on parent questions. Our brain is focused on rehearsal prep and being with your children. And so I also have a personal policy that I don't take meetings that I don't know the content. So when someone emails me and says, can we talk? I say, absolutely. What is it about? And if they push back and say, well, I'll just let you know when I get there, I won't accept the meeting until I know exactly what that meeting is about, because it's one of those behaviors that I feel like people try to manipulate you when they kind of control that information. And so I've just learned that I just won't take those meetings because
I love that.
It's a self-preservation. I want to be able to be prepared for that meeting. And so I don't like being caught off guard by that stuff. So that's just a little personal policy that I have.
I love that. I'm going to cruise through the rest of this list.
Yeah, this is an awesome list.
We're almost done. Change your classroom setup. Charlene Archibek has an incredible DVD presentation. Is DVDs even a thing anymore? But yes, it's there about how to change those setups to something interesting. Keep folders of different colors. In my situation, I have 3 choirs and I have a binder of music for each, and they're all different colors. This goes back to the keep a clean desk. I can just grab it. The green one is for this. Clock face. Where is your clock? And where is it in the classroom? Is it away from you? Is it near you? Is it one thing that really helps is, can you see it and not the students? I don't want the students aware of the time. I want to be aware of the time. But also for me, I need a minute hand and a second hand. I'm a visual learner and I don't do math. If I have a digital clock in there, I can't do math while I'm conducting. I don't know. If class ends at 12:52 and it is 12:43, I don't know how many minutes that is. But if I can see the hour hand and the minute hand and the second hand, I'm good. I have a Velcro wall in my classroom where all the remote controls go on this wall and I can just reach for it and grab it, and that's where they live. Don't plan ahead. What? First day of school, I brought in a friend of mine who helped me voice the choir. And I had 3 students drop on the first day of school, and it messed up my folder count. It messed up my seating chart. It messed up my balance that I had already been planning on. And she said to me, Peter, the rest of us don't plan so far ahead and we're happier. And I went, really? Like it was a foreign concept to me. Realize what can be planned for and what can't. Keep assignments easily gradable. I'm going to show an example. This is the way I used to do concert reports. Students had to attend concerts. They had to show a specific word choice. They had sentence fluency. I was correcting reading. It was a points assignment it was, but this is how they had to turn this in. I quickly, after a seminar like this, changed to this format. Is score yourself. Did you arrive on time? Were you dressed properly? Did you stay? And they score themselves. They turn it in. So much easier. Because what do I really care about? Did they go to the thing? Then after easily gradable, student-directed learning, daily sectionals, send them to some place where they become the teachers. It will run poorly the first 3 times you do it, but then it gets better. Make sure that every group in your purview has something easily singable from day 1, whether that's a unison piece or a round or whatever is easily singable in your work environment. Make sure they have that. Rehearsal order. There are a lot of books on this, making sure that we begin rehearsal with something that's successful, that they are just reviewing. Then we go into the white heat portion, the hard work, and the hard work that is cleaning, and then end with something successful so that they leave snapping their fingers each day. Stay out of the faculty lounge. If you've been in there, you know what I'm talking about. It can be a negative energy space. Just don't go in there. And the last thing I'm going to end with is No is a complete sentence. And Alex has shared some of his ways of saying no. And I love that quote. There are great ways to say no. I'll offer one that I start writing in emails often. I sincerely appreciate the invitation to have us join you. After reviewing the schedule, however, I realize our February is too busy for me to accept. I must respectfully decline, but hope that we can involve in the future, perhaps next year. I might offer these people to go as a next step, etc. And the same thing goes for when you're asking people to do things. I love it when I receive a request that says, would you please do X? If not you, who else might you recommend? And that takes the pressure off of me to say yes. So while we are talking about saying no to certain invitations, look at how we might verbalize things to another person and make it more easy for them to say no in a way that's not going to upend the ship. So other ideas? This is the end of this section. So for the listeners.
I love that we are not just talking about taking care of ourselves and what we're prioritizing, but also how to minimize those triggers. Students talk all the time about that triggers me, or I've done this and it's triggering. This is removing so many of those triggers, minimizing the frustrations so we can continue to show up and avoid that burnout feeling. These are such great lists.
So for the listeners at home, make sure find one piece of self-care, one piece of adjusting the perspective, and one way to minimize a frustration, and implement those this week. And then as the week rolls around to next week, maybe select one more and just create an aggregate of self-care and minimizing burnout. Alex?
Oh, no, I was just going to add, because I brought it in at the start of this, my office, if you work in a team environment, we have a bell, and the bell is inscribed, it's called the bell of hell. And the bell of hell goes ting-a-ling-a-ling for you, but not for me. It's an actual song, but we ring it when we have difficult encounters with parents, or we receive a difficult email. And it's a really disarming experience, because we, like, a lot of times if you are receiving something on your own, that's a very personal experience. And by ringing the bell, it becomes a communal act, which can be perceived as good or bad. But by talking about it, we don't sit with it the rest of the day. You know, it doesn't cloud. You talked earlier about, like, what does a bad day look like? I can let a bad email make my bad day, but by ringing that little bell and just talking about it for 30 seconds, some of that weight is lifted. And so it's just really nice. It's a nice communal way to kind of share the load a little bit, take a little bit off of you.
That's very healthy. And the way you're speaking about it, I can tell it's not a negative energy dump from your coworkers. It's a lifting up, which is great.
Truly.
This has been such a great conversation. I feel like we've covered so many great tips and tools. It's one of those that we can listen to again and again to get more ideas. And we'll make sure the listeners know how to find all of this information, and we'll link all of the great resources that you have spoken of there. But you've already given us the one thing you want us to remember. It's the do one from each and go from there. But is there anything else you want the listener to, that really matters, you want them to walk away from this episode with?
I will say, if there are listeners out there experiencing heavy burnout, I've been there. We've been there, and it is temporary. And so take that time, much like healing a wound. If you're in bad shape, vocal works, self-care works. These things do elongate the fine and fantastic music educator that you are. So thank you, and thanks to all the wonderful work you are doing.
Well, thank you so much for coming on this show, Peter. It was so great to have you back. And Alex, thanks for being a co-host. It makes these conversations even more fun.
Thanks, Emmy. Thanks, Peter.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.
What a great episode.
Yes. I mean, I sometimes pinch myself that Peter and I live in the same town. It's just, he's such an incredible fount of knowledge and experience, and he's so humble in his presentation, and he's just so realistic and relatable. And I love how he brings in his very vulnerable personal experiences into the conversation. And I think that's how we can tackle some of these challenges, is just being honest with one another, honest and open. That vulnerability aspect, and just his, like you said, his willingness to do the work, do the reading, and then synthesize it into something that we can take as a to-do list. So helpful. And look at the breadth of knowledge. We've had him on the show before talking about
preparing and accomplishing an all-state reading chorus, an all-state sight singing chorus, and then to flip and talk about burnout when you know how much work goes into something like a sight singing chorus and then how to avoid the burnout. This is just such a great topic. And I had a student call me, a prior student who's already graduated and out in the world, called me yesterday. And it was so nice to hear their voice, but also the main point was, is it supposed to be this hard? And they're doing all the right things. They're setting up these fantastic behavioral strategies in the classroom. They're making music, but it's still feeling hard. And how these are some great tools. So thank you for recommending us bringing Peter Steenblik back on the show. So good.
So happy. Thanks for having me again.
Well, as always, this is one of those advocacy and collaboration curated episodes. We're thankful for our entire committee and so thankful for ACDA making that possible. But in case no one has told you today, you matter. We all know that music matters, especially all the hard work we are doing in the classroom and how to avoid that burnout. And we'll see you next time on the Music It Matters podcast.